Let me get this situated. Can you hear me okay? All right. If you can't see any of the screenshots, just yell, like raise your hand. I may not see you, but raise your hand. Some of them are a little dark, so I can zoom in. Afterwards, all of these slides will be on a GitHub repository, and I'll share that out. But they're all in Markdown, so it's pretty easy to kind of follow along. We're going to go through a lot of data and a lot of information in a short period of time. So, all right, so today I'm going to talk about pyews, and EWS is Exchange Web Services, and this is a Python package that I wrote that actually allows you to interact with Exchange Web Services on Linux, Mac, Windows, pretty much any system that you want. So a little bit about me. Yeah, that is actually me. Is it? Hello. Okay. So a little bit about me. So I have a lot of background in digital forensics and incident response, as well as Blue Team, and I like to automate anything that I can at all. I mean, it doesn't really matter what it is. If I have to do it twice, I'm going to write a script for it. I also like to call myself an open sourcer. Right? No one get it? Okay. I thought that was funny. I also like to take long walks down binary trees, and yeah, you can read that. All right, so a little bit about Exchange in general, but first, before we dive in, we need to understand. Yeah, this is what I was talking about. This is REST versus SOAP. Anyone familiar with APIs? You use them on a daily basis, right? You should if you haven't, and if you don't, I have like a whole series coming out here soon that I'll share as well. But REST is representable state transfer. Got any more of those REST APIs, you know? And it's really all about HTTP methods. So you're sending an HTTP request to either get data, post data, put data, which is like modify it, as well as delete. But all this is on from like the client side, and it forwards it on to some DB or some system in the background, and then it just returns all the data in JSON. JSON's really nice and easy to use, and it's pretty straightforward to kind of parse. So SOAP is a little bit different. And if you can't read that, it says a SOAP request, thank you, sorry, this is a REST room. No? Okay. So it's the simple object access protocol. And really, it's just XML. That is a good representation of XML. So overall, in a SOAP API, it actually has these kind of forms or shapes, and it's all based on a wrapped envelope. And inside that envelope, you actually have a header, and you have metadata about that header, attributes. Then you have a body element, and that body element is actually going to contain the methods. So instead of actually doing an HTTP get, post, update, you're always going to post, and the body is going to tell it whether you want to get data or not. And then each body and method has elements and variables and all that in it. Again, it's post only. So you're not going to send a GET request. You're not going to send a put. You're always going to send a post. So let's dive into a little bit about Exchange. So Exchange is complex. If you've ever, anyone here manage Exchange or have managed it or use it? Anyone have Outlook? So Exchange is all about the clients connecting it, and they connect it over different protocols. So whether you're actually sending it over POP or IMOP is a whole other protocol, but clients like your mobile device, your Outlook client, your Mac, will all send it over EWS. And they'll actually connect to an IIS server, which then proxies back to the actual HTTPS service of SOAP. The SOAP, or EWS, actually connects to the mailbox database. So this is like a wrapper for accessing the mailboxes, all the data within those mailboxes. And you have some delivery queues and some other stuff. So here's an example of actually, you can see, I think it's almost all modern or smartphone, Outlook for Mac, Outlook for Windows, all use EWS underneath the hood. Newer phones, like if you have Outlook, the Outlook app for Office 365, it will connect over a REST, but they still use SOAP as well. But it connects to EWS as well as some other services like RPC, EAS, so on and so forth. But the basis of everything is around EWS. So you have HTTPS SOAP requests that actually gets sent to an IIS web server that's running on that exchange. And that actually forwards it off and tries to do lookups and access actual mailbox data. So basically everything that you can do in Exchange, and I mean like add an email, delete an email, add a calendar item, add a group to an IM or an IM group, remove people. Everything is done through EWS. So you have access to everything that you can do in the UI of Exchange and more through EWS. So currently, these are the most common ways to actually connect. So you use .NET or C#, and it uses the EWS managed API. That's completely different. If you ever see that, this is a DLL that you have on Windows systems that they just wrap EWS in to make it easily accessible. Same with PowerShell. PowerShell and C#, JS, Node, you can access it through REST, but it's only for Office 365, not on-premise Exchange at all. It does not have REST at this time. Again, PowerShell with Microsoft Exchange Web Services DLL, so a compiled DLL that only runs on Windows systems. And then you have PowerShell Remote. You can actually remote into Exchange Online through Office 365. You can actually remote to a jump box or the actual Exchange server. Please don't ever do that. But you can actually do that and run those commands. And then you also have PowerShell, just the general Exchange commandlets. Get mailbox or whatever the heck it is. All of those are actually using that DLL underneath them. So what about Nix users? Anyone ever see this XKCD article? I love this. I have it framed because it's amazing. It's kind of, man. Let me see if I can stretch that up. There you go. He goes, no, I'm not interested in updating my antivirus. I run Linux. And he gets on his dirt bike and runs off. Pretty funny. I have a weird sense of humor, I think. So pyews is why Linux users. So this is a framework that I built in Python that works in Python 2 and 3, but it wraps the entire EWS into an easily digestible package. And we'll go through all of those kind of functions that they currently support and how you can extend and allow it to do whatever the heck you want. The repository is there. I'll have the links at the end, but there's also the documentation. It's pretty thorough. So to install it, let's zoom in. So to install it, it's on PyPy. So if you're not familiar with Python or package management, it's under, you use pip, which is their built-in package manager. Pip stands for Python. There's like 4 meanings, like Python is Python, or pip is Python, I think is what it stands for. Yeah. So you can install it on Windows or Linux and run this. And it's just pip install py-ews. Or you can clone the repository. And to use it, you first actually have to create a user configuration. So everything with pyews is with this user configuration object. So this will connect to all the service endpoints that you can actually perform actions with. So we have a couple different options when it comes to actually authenticating to Exchange. We have to import the library, pyews import user config. But before you really kind of go down that road, you need to make sure you have these access rights. This is eDiscovery. Has anyone ever used eDiscovery? permissions in Exchange? Okay, so e-discovery is what digital forensics or IR people or your compliance administrator will actually put a hold on your mailbox and you will never know. And that means you think you're deleting an email and you're not. They're holding it. And to do that, you actually have to have these rights in Exchange. And they can do automated searching, but it's all through this crappy UI that is so slow and crashes like half the time. If you have a mailbox of 20,000 or more, it will crash within 24 hours. And it'll probably take about 48 hours to run. That's how crappy it is. So, but these endpoints are there, which is great. So you need to have e-discovery rights, compliance administrator, e-discovery manager, so on and so forth. But once you actually have those, then you can provide a username and password. There's no OAuth or any other authentication mechanism besides your username and password with EWS. So it's not the most secure, but it's there, and it will be there for a long time. So if you don't have those rights, but you still want to search, then you can actually impersonate. So if you are given the impersonation rights over a specific mailbox, then you can actually search as that user. You can impersonate that user. And you can do this all through EWS as well. So depending on your situation, it's better to have the e-discovery rights because it's very restricted. The rights aren't, they won't get fudged, I guess. But impersonation rights are possible. And so you need the application impersonation, or the actual right on the AD object is called MS Exchange impersonation. Once you do that, you then, create an impersonation object by importing that part of the library, and then you just pass it into your user configuration. So from now on, when you make any other calls using that object, you actually impersonate based on that user's rights. So this is the deep dive. Can you see that okay? A lot of this is like comments up there, so you don't really. But to impersonate, you just need the SMTP address. There's a couple you can use the SID of that account, but you can actually use SMTP, primary SMTP, a principal name, etc. But if you can see at the bottom here, this is where we get into the fun gritty. That looks funky, right? I mean, so this is a SOAP header that we'll add to our SOAP request. And it indicates I want to connect using this SID or using this SMTP address, and you have to actually put that when you actually post the data to a SOAP service. So the other thing is that anyone here familiar with auto-discover? Anyone ever seen that, right? You connect to Exchange and it says, hey, this is your it'll automatically discover everything. It's awesome. All right, so pyews actually supports this auto-discover, but Microsoft's recommendations are a little weird. They actually don't have an official way of doing this. They actually say, okay, you can use what they call an SCP, what did they call it? Yeah. So we basically create these URLs that you see, those four, based on your username and password or based on your email address. And you can also use what they call an SCP, which is a service control point that actually is registered in your Active Directory or Azure Active Directory, and it points to your Exchange servers. So if you have 40 Exchange servers and 10 racks or whatever, they'll actually make a record in Active Directory called SCP. But you can actually just, pass in that user configuration and we'll automatically, by default, try auto-discover. So we'll generate these URLs and actually, try to authenticate, and we'll provide every single version. So there's 9 versions total of Exchange. And so we'll just attempt each one. So you can think 5 times 9. We're going to try every single one of those throughout the time. So here's an example. So we're actually going to auto-discover, and we're printing out, the user's email address, And then we identified the EWS URL and their specific Exchange version, and this is the actual SOAP response that you get when you make that call. And it says, hey, I know who you are, and I'm going to print all the attributes about that user here. Pretty layered, pretty deep. But the overall structure of our request is this massive. Let's see if we can find the actual XML, and I'll zoom in here in a bit. But we have the envelope, and then we have the actual request header. And in there, we have to specify the exact version of Exchange, as well as what action we want to take. Here, we're actually going to get user settings. And then we can also provide the connecting SID if we wanted to impersonate. But the real magic is all in the body. And this is saying, in the get user settings message, we actually are requesting these settings. We're requesting the internal EWS URL, the external, the user DN, so on and so forth. And so you can request whatever attributes that you want, or you can just get them all. Pretty straightforward. But if you don't want to use AutoDiscover and you already kind of know, or if you want to use AutoDiscover and you can actually provide a very specific, you know that you're on Office 365, then you can do that as well. You can limit the scope a little bit. But the other versions are Office 365, Exchange 2019, 16, all the way to Exchange 2010. I can support 2007, but how dare you ever be on 2007? If you are, please don't tell me, run. So, besides AutoDiscover, you can, if you actually know your Exchange URL, you can provide that as well. So, a direct connection. So, if you have, your email addresses or funkysoup.com or whatever, I don't know. I'm just making things up. But your actual, Exchange version is going to be soup funky, so we'll never guess it, right? Then you can actually pass in that full URL. And again, you can pass in if you wanted to actually impersonate. So all these objects that I'm talking about are the user config, and all we're doing is setting up how are we going to authenticate? What are the reasons? Are we going to do AutoDiscover? Are we actually going to impersonate, or do we already have rights? If we do, we're good to go. But all of those that object, however we create it, will actually be passed into what they call a service endpoint. And currently, these are the ones that we actually support. So we can delete items. We can get their mailbox rules. You can get all of the searchable mailboxes, meaning whatever I'm authenticating with, these are all the mailboxes that I have rights to actually search. Cool thing is that they'll actually expand all distribution groups found and automatically add them to a list. You can resolve the names, and you can actually search those mailboxes. This is where the juicy stuff gets. All right, so these are 3 situations. Anyone recognize these? I mean, I can read them off, but as a security professional, when someone within my org reports a malicious message, I want to find and search all mailboxes for a similar message, right? It's pretty straightforward use case. But as a security professional, I want to actively hunt for malicious messages. So you have a list of IOCs, you have specific attachments, you know that certain keywords are in the body of the message, certain email senders, so on and so forth. This is where you're actually, going out and hunting for actual malicious messages in your environment. By the way, don't click on shit. As a security professional, though, I want to find all emails received today that have any URL or any attachment. And I want to know all of those, right? That's pretty cool. We'll show you how you can do all of this. So the typical workflow that you'll receive, right, for that first kind of use case and a few others is we'll actually retrieve all the emails. And we need to find all the mailboxes within our org that we have rights to. And you can specify a very specific set of users or everyone in your org. Just kind of depends on your scope. But then we want to actually search all those mailboxes. And we need to provide a specific search term that we want to provide. And we can actually delete all of those messages or very specific ones. And there's a couple different options when we talk about delete. So get searchable mailboxes. This is all about finding, again, all of those messages. And like I said, you can actually expand any found groups, and they're all contained within those mailboxes. But when you return each mailbox, we can actually search and add based on this reference ID. This is the mailbox ID. This is a unique identifier for that attribute in the mailbox database. And if you wanted to filter a list, you can add logic there as well. But for the scope, it's mostly everyone wants to search everything. Can you see that? Or is that pretty small? So every time I zoom in, it jumps. That's still pretty small. But here we're actually just getting all those mailboxes, and it's returning their IDs as well as some attributes, like what is their SMTP address, what is their name, their display name, so on and so forth. Those are just basic attributes for that item. And so we can actually go through and filter those if we wanted to. All right, so the search mailbox. So now if we actually have our list of messages that we want, or mailboxes that we want to search, we need to actually perform a search. And the one reason why EWS is extremely powerful is it is faster than anything else out there. You wouldn't think for this old protocol of SOAP. Side note, SOAP is actually a standard by an RFC standard. REST is not at all. It never has been, never will be. But SOAP is, and it has been for many years. But so given a single or a list of mailboxes of those reference IDs, we can actually perform our search. So we just need to import the from pyews search mailboxes, give it a list, and you can see here this subject account. That is actually our search term. So I'm looking at the subject for any emails that have the word account in them. Pretty basic. We need to pass in that user configuration object that we created, however we wanted to actually authenticate, and then our reference IDs. So whatever mailboxes we want to actually search. And then when we actually print those, we can return a whole bunch of properties on each message that it actually found. So this search query is all about its and/or logic. So we're going to actually run a search here. And right now we're printing out the body of the message. This is just the raw HTML, right? We have a conversation index, created time, culture, date time received, date time sent, display info, flags, has attachments, importance, I'm skipping some, it's draft, is recent, is submitted, last modified. This is the raw MIME content, and it's all base 64. This is the entire message. We have the OWI link. We have sender, sensitivity, set value, unique hash. This is the base 64 decoded raw MIME content with full headers, with full message body, with everything that if you open that .message or .eml, this is what you would see inside of it. And we have some other attributes, but the entire list, and I'm going to kind of slowly scroll. There's many. There's like 30 that you can choose. And so you have access to everything about that message. And if you wanted to get the attachments, you can do that as well. OWA link. We have sensitivity, sort value. And a couple of side notes here for some of these attributes is that flagged. What did the user actually flag that message? Why is that important? Right? I mean, that is, you know that the user interacted with that, or someone did in that mailbox, and that they flagged it for review. So they looked at it. They may have thought it was suspicious. Who knows? You got to ask the user. Importance. Was it sent at high priority importance? It's hugely important, especially when you're defending against BEC and other type of attacks. You want to know, are they trying to trick you into thinking this is really, really an important message? You need to act now. We also have, again, the MIME content. Was it read? Did the user actually read the message or not? That means they opened it and they took a gander. And 2 recipients and some other attributes. But there's a lot of attributes in here that are extremely useful. So the search syntax is all based on exchanges, what they call AQS. And it's advanced query syntax. And it's pretty straightforward, but besides seeing the subject and account in our example, on the previous slide, you can actually search a lot more options. So you can specify if you wanted a very specific from user, or almost a regex, you can just add a star to it. So some domain, star at some domain. 2, the CC field, BCC, any participants, the subject, and you can actually see the product and product development. Those 2 in that bracket means any of those 2 words. Not a full string. If you wanted the full string, it would be actually, you have to put it in quotes. You can do body, content, attachment, and you can actually search for attachment names or extensions. And any other there's some other properties. But you can also filter by when like time range. And you have these and or not connectors. Woo! Where did my page go? Technical difficulties. One sec. Sorry about this, all. I do everything in Markdown because it's fun. Oh, man. All right, we're just going to go old school. So the actual, some attributes that you can run is, this is one. Subject account and body has the word click in it, and it was received today. Right? Pretty straightforward search. But you can also say, okay, let's do subject and account and body click, and the attachment had the word fax in it. Somewhere. Doesn't matter where it's at, it had fax. You can also specify, again, from Mr. Robot or from me and subject, any of those keywords in the subject. Raise, upgrade, warning, expire, so on and so forth. And you can do subject Office 365, but not from the IT department. Again, body, HTTP, star. Is there any HTTPS or HTTP links or FTP or whatever you want in the body of the message? Or attachment star. Any message with an attachment. Doesn't really matter what it is. We don't care. We just want them all. So in that case, that's our third use case of, finding all messages that have URLs and or attachments that have been sent today. Pretty straightforward to do with EWS. We can also specifically, delete messages. And each deleted message has a couple different options. There is the hard delete. That means it's not recoverable and it is permanently removed from the mailbox database. You can soft delete, which means if you have the, what do they call it? Dumpster enabled, you can actually recover that message in your recovered messages, I think is what it's called, or whatever. But you can actually recover it. Or you can just move to the deleted items. Pretty straightforward. To actually use this, we just need to provide a very specific message ID to our delete item object or class, and we can actually provide a user config. And then we just print out the response, and it says, hey, we deleted this message. Pretty straightforward. So that's only if you really need to actually delete a message. I'm actually going to go back here and look at this property again. So to actually print out some of these, and this is one thing I skipped over, you just access, anyone familiar with dicts or dictionaries or lists in Python? Anyone familiar with Python? Yeah. I just started on Python last year, or the beginning of this year, and before it was all PowerShell, and I love it. So if you haven't checked it out, I actually did another talk at BSides Springfield. They did a comparison between PowerShell and Python, side-by-side comparison. So yeah, if you're interested in that, let me know. But you access it by just accessing that object and that dictionary name of message ID or sender or any of those other like MIME content, so on and so forth. All right. So one of the great things here, let's see if we can actually expand this, is that you can add new endpoints really extremely easy with pyews. I've made it in such a way where it's extensible. Like last night, I actually realized that it wasn't getting the entire MIME content and added that in like 10 minutes by a little Google and some code. But overall, how the actual service endpoint, you need to inherit a service endpoint, which is how it's going to actually do all the SOAP requests in the backend. And you just need to actually provide what your SOAP message is going to look like. And in here, again, we're actually, forming our message, and we have the XML signifier for anyone here use XML? Hate it? Love it? I mean, it sucks, but it's what we got. And you actually have the SOAP envelope, and each one of these, you can actually specify what the syntax is for that SOAP. Here you can see where it says XML-NS, that's the namespace of this XML document. And a namespace is just like what you see in C#, PowerShell, whatever, almost every language they have namespaces of what you can access based on that definition. And there's just like the basic XML namespace. But we know that it's a SOAP namespace. We can also provide the XMLS NST, and this is the types. So Microsoft, everything is based on a WSDL file. It's a Windows, it's a web service description language, I think is what it stands for. God, the acronyms are horrible. But it's a definition of how all the services that you have available and what you actually have access to. And each one of those actually has inherited types. And those types are the actual functions that you can perform. And they're extremely detailed. You also have the different messages, and those are typically the message attributes that you'll find in the body, as well as any metadata around it. And we just close off our header. Or I'm sorry, we're starting a header there. And we actually provide a specific version of Exchange. So whether Office 365, which is actually Exchange 2016, we have Exchange 2019, 2010, so on and so forth. But we need to provide that in the header to say, hey, I'm trying to authenticate. Here's my creds. This is the version that I know. If you don't provide one that is a value or a known attribute to that Exchange server, it'll just say, I don't know what the hell you're talking about. And then that impersonation header as well. And here's where the fun stuff is with the body elements. And this is where you can actually get very specific details. I'm going to switch over here. Don't look. So this is what I was talking about with the get item. This is actually getting all the attributes of a mail attribute or a mail message. Again, we have our very basic SOAP. We have our header, but the body is where we actually define what we want to do. And here we're saying, okay, get item. Here's the type or the namespace and the type that we want to use. And the item shape is going to be, okay, we want to get all the properties. We want to include the MIME content. We want to have the best body type. There's a couple different options for HTML or plain text, but if you use best, it'll just try to figure it out. It's weird that they actually use best. I don't know of any other product that actually is like, oh, best is that works. Additional properties is where we want to actually find the property tag. And anyone ever seen Exchange MSOXC documents? They're like 900 pages of PDF documents that explain Exchange. They're not indexed. They're not something that you can just go on Microsoft's documentation and figure out. It is literally 900 pages of just, yeah, you'll have a headache after reading them. Like they're massive. But they explain every single property type and what those attributes. And here we're saying this is a property type of string, but the property tag is this hex code. I don't know what the hell that means. I just know that it points to the message pointer of all message headers in raw format. I don't really care why it does that, but it does that. And then we provide the actual message ID. So this is the very specific message ID. You can't store message IDs because they change. They're always different. If they get moved, if that email gets updated, if something else in the mailbox needs that ID, and it just kind of, messes things around. Especially if you move a message, it's automatically going to be a new message ID and all that. So if a user touches it or replies to it, it's going to have a new message ID. So you need to make sure that, if you're looking through this, you need to build in some logic to actually, use the same or find a way to actually find that message and not rely on the message ID you found yesterday. And then we're actually just formatting the body with our variables. And we close out our SOAP header and we're good to go. There's also, anyone here just Office 365? So I wanted to point out that there's this other tool that I wrote that's actually called Graphfish. Let me see if this will actually show up. The demo guides. All right. So this is called Graphfish. So I'm horrible at names. I'm not a marketing person, but I looked at it because it's Microsoft Graph API and fish. So I just kind of combined the two words. Clever. But this is a Graphfish, and this actually does the same exact thing, but using Microsoft Graph's API. But it requires OAuth 2 authentication, if anyone's familiar with OAuth 2. But it'll actually let you search, delete, move messages, get inbox rules, all that, all through Microsoft Graph API, which is a REST-based API, which you don't have to provide all the SOAP and all that other stuff, but only for Office 365. Doesn't work for Exchange Online or Exchange on-premise. Current features, again, we can create a new search, and the search actually does it a little bit different. Instead of with a search in SOAP and regular Exchange, it actually will create a folder. You can move messages that you found in that search, but with Graph, it will actually create a hidden folder in the user's mailbox that will contain all messages found, so once you actually create a search, any messages found after you've created that search will be added to that folder as well. which is extremely powerful. If you have like generic rules that you want anyone with any PDF that has facts in it or whatever, you wanted to move to this hidden folder, a user can't access it, but if you have rights, again, which you delegate through Azure Active Directory, you can actually hold those messages and just keep a repository across all your mailboxes. Pretty powerful. You can delete that search, which will basically release those messages from that folder. You can actually delete a message. You can list all the mailbox rules across your organization. And this is, again, super fast, pretty easy to use as well. This package is pretty straightforward, but the other thing is you can actually move messages to a different folder, so not just deleted items. So if you just had like a phishing hidden folder in your user's mailbox, you can move those as well. All right, I'm actually done a little early. Sorry for the demo delays, but here's the actual documentation. So pyews is on the readthedocs.io. It's pretty detailed and it explains like all the class attributes. There's also the repository, which you can just go fork or clone, however you want to do it. I wrote a blog about it for work at Swimlane. It's swimlane.com/blogs. I also did one for Graphish as well, and I have like a 5-part series explaining OAuth 2 if you're ever interested, because it's a mess. I also have a personal blog, letsautomate.it, and on Twitter, I'm MS Administrator. And that means Microsoft Administrator, not Miss